Hi, welcome to the first ever episode of The Real Estate Pessimist. The truth? No, I got that wrong. Good, bad. All right, take three. All right. Welcome to the first ever episode of The Real Estate Pessimist, the good, bad, and the truth about real estate investing. I'm one of your hosts, Erik Stenbakken. I'm a real estate investor and property manager. I'm based here in Colorado. And with me is Kristi. Kristi, introduce yourself.
Hey, I'm Kristi Kandel, and I'm also a real estate investor, property manager, and also real estate developer. And I split my time between Fort Myers Beach, Florida, and Lake Tahoe.
So you're going to find us in different places with different backgrounds. So when we're out and about, because we do get out and about, because we're very active in our own investments. I know a lot of people talk about the beauty of just having an investment and just turning it over to everybody else. And then you live this life just on the beach sipping Mai Tais. That's part of the reason this podcast exists, because that is just not true. What would you say was the most recent active involvement in your real estate investment you just did, Kristi?
Well, we had this thing called Hurricane Helene that just came through and ripped up all of Florida and many parts of the Southeast region. So I have spent my birthday celebrating and watching the hurricane come in, but then the next couple days after that, cleaning up. And I am now incredibly sore and tired, but here we are. We're here to tell you these stories.
Yeah, we're both real estate investors, but we both feel very passionately that there's more to real estate than the get rich quick. And that's kind of why this podcast exists, is to talk about, well, the good, which we will, the bad, because there's some of that, and the truth, because a lot of that gets glossed over and not really talked about in a way that is helpful for audience. So that's the birth of this. You'll get to know more about us as we unfold this. The main purpose of this podcast is to educate, to warn, and to inspire you. It isn't just to tell terrible stories of failure, but it is to say, hey, bad things happen, but survivors survive and eventually thrive if we stick with it, because real estate is about the long game.
Yeah, and if I think about any circumstance that has happened with a property or with different things like hurricanes or natural disasters, the biggest challenge is not actually fixing what happened. It's the unknown and it's defining how you do that. So once you have that roadmap, then you can charge forward and then you can have that certainty inside of going, okay, we have a plan. And that's why we want to tell you the good, the bad, and the truth about real estate investing, because if you know that when you buy a property, you're going to have X, Y, and Z happen with insurance, or in this market, you will have X, Y, and Z happen with eviction. So we want to tell you all of that just so you have that exposure and awareness, so we can take away the unknown. We can help replace your fear with confidence and knowledge. And then that way you can jump in and start making your own investments and have the ability to have a schedule where you do get to travel to different places around the country while also having your
Exactly. It's this balance between passive and active, and we're going to talk about that later. But Kristi, tell me, how did you get started in real estate investing? I mean, did you just like pick up a book in the library once and go like, yeah, that's for me, I'm in?
Not at all. So I actually grew up in a small town in Ohio to where we rented our entire lives. So the thought of owning a property was never in the cards. It was just, okay, you're going to have shelter of some kind, but owning properties for someone else. So when I ended up graduating college, I accidentally fell into real estate development. And then that gave me all of the knowledge and the insight on here's how you do permits, here's how you hire contractors. But it still took me 8 years into that career of working on developments before I ever bought my first property. Because I also looked at property as something where it was, ooh, if I'm putting down roots, I don't want to feel trapped in one area. So I just always thought, well, if you buy a property, then you're stuck there for 30 years and you can never leave, which is clearly not true. So then in 2017, it was actually having a conversation with my CPA, and he said, you need to have more deductions so you can pay less taxes. And I said, well, how do I do that? And he told me, well, we've maxed out your 401k. We've done that. He's like, but honestly, you need to have real estate and you need to have those investments so that way we can have more deductions and write-offs. And then that's when I accidentally bought my first townhome that turned into a house hack that I was short-term renting and living in. And quickly caught the bug though, because I
That's
realized
right.
after my first year in it, I realized, oh my goodness, my mortgage, HOA, and utilities were all covered by my renters. And that is when I got very excited about real estate development or about real estate investing. And that's actually when one of my friends in Tahoe told me about the Bigger Pockets podcast. And I started just consuming those episodes and hearing the stories and getting more and more comfortable with the idea of buying another property or maybe several more. And the rest is history.
Okay, so wait. So you're telling me that you bought some properties before you knew everything about real estate investing?
100%.
Okay, so similar. I got bit by the bug and it was accidental also. We were planning to sell the house that I am currently in. Spoiler alert, we didn't sell it. We were driving all around the town of Fort Collins here in Colorado, looking for just the right property that would replace this one. We never found it because I have a huge shop and I couldn't find that to replace it, didn't want to give it up. But while we're driving around, the real estate investor kept saying like, oh yeah, that's my house. And that's my house over there. And that's my house over there. And after, I don't know, a dozen of these, I was like, what in the world? What gives? You own these houses? Yeah, I own 80. I said, wait, 80? Like, I had no idea a human being, like one person, could own more than one house, maybe two. I've heard of people owning two. But this guy, it blew my mind. Fast forward a few years later, we bought our first long-term rental property. And we did not know everything. We knew a few things. We knew some basics, but we'll get into that here in just a minute. But there's more that I didn't know than I did know. I had never heard of Bigger Pockets. I heard my wife say something about the name Bigger Pockets. I thought, that's bizarre. Is that like a fashion website? What is that about? We started getting involved. The point is that we started, and we got the bug. And I remember, you talk about having that realization. I remember picking up the first rent check from our first renters and standing in the sidewalk right after I picked up that rent check. And I looked at the rent check. I don't know what it was, $1,700. And I knew that our mortgage was about $1,200 on a 15-year mortgage. And I thought, oh, we're doing this again. Like, this is
Yes,
like,
you caught
what?
the bug, you got the energy, and you're like, okay, this is addictive. I get it. I can see this now.
It is. It was, I kept saying that I wasn't very good at math, but I was like, wait a minute. If you put in a quarter and you get out 30 cents, I know that math. I'm doing that as many times as I can. And that's exactly what we did. We kept taking out that 30 cents, so to speak, and putting it back in the machine. And it just kept doing it and doing it, doing it. But it's not always that way. And that's kind of what we're going to talk about here. Did you have any kind of turning point in your investing career where you're like, I'm taking this seriously now?
For me, it was my third and my fourth properties. So the first one was the townhome that I house hacked and realized, wait, I live for free. And then my partner, who I bought the next property with, he told me, he said, hey, let's buy a property and Airbnb it only. And I'm like, that seems scary, like putting all our eggs in one basket. Keep in mind, he is 20 years older than me, and he was telling me we should do Airbnb, and I was so terrified. I'm like, I don't know. So we did that, and it was a success because we were testing out our partnership early and how we work together, and it went really well. So then I was like, okay. And at that time, I had been listening to Bigger Pockets where they say, jar for dollars, and you can do all these things. Send mailers out, see if people will sell. Well, I realized in Lake Tahoe where I was at, my dog, she told me, she said, Mom, I want a house with a backyard so I can just go outside while you're working and I can just bask in the sun. So I realized in my community, and this is why investing in your local market is so important, and it gives you such a head start over other places, because I knew
Yes.
that we were building an event center that you couldn't see. They were still 3 years out from ever putting a shovel in the ground. But then I also knew that they got rid of the trailer park that was right by the lake and they were building $1 million condos. Well, fast forward to after COVID and those are now $5 million condos. But there was this one community left and it was pretty run down. But I realized, wait, if all of these areas are turning, this is about to be a gold mine. So I remember watching a Netflix special while handwriting the envelopes on 67 properties to mail them out to this community to see who would sell. And I basically said, hey guys, I live across Highway 50. I have a dog. She would like a backyard. If anyone has ever thought of selling, I would love to talk to you to buy your single family home. Well, from that, I got two responses back, but it did take a couple weeks. So I thought it didn't work and I was getting bummed. And then all of a sudden, Grandma Shirley gives me a call, and she was the original owner of this 1961 house and had lived in Carson, so off the hill, for about 7 years and had been long term renting the property. And she said, "You know what, Kristi? I think it's time to let this one go." She said, "You want to meet me over there tomorrow? You can take a look." So I was like, "Heck yeah, this actually worked. What?" So we go over there and I meet her. And I mean, this place, it needed a lot of love. But it had the huge yard, and I saw potential at this point because now I had remodeled two different properties. Um, the backyard, it was a jungle landscape with 16 feet high at some spots. And I said, "All right, Grandma Shirley, I will redo the inside, but I don't know what I don't know is in the backyard." So I said, "You take care of the backyard. I'll buy everything else as is." So I ended up getting that property, and that one, we can go into more stories, but that one basically prints money now. It's insane, all the stories that go with that property. But from that same mailer, there was a guy who lived in Long Beach who had a fourplex, and it was two streets down. And I remember at the time thinking, I can't buy two at a time. But what we did is I kept the conversation going because I said, we're not even at the point where I need to get the loan or close or not close. So I kept pushing him hard on the price point. And then a couple of things happened in life. And 9 months later, we ended up closing on that fourplex for a smoking deal, and that property also prints money. And those two from pretty much day one were amazing buys. So that got me hook, line, and sinker. And I said, okay, I want to buy at least one property every year and sometimes more. The next year, I accidentally bought 4 properties in Ohio, which are plenty of stories there. But yes, that's when I caught the bug.
Yeah, I mean, everybody has their story of how they really took it seriously. It took us a lot longer. What happened is we had 5 long-term rentals just outside of Colorado State University in Fort Collins, and we had decided it's like that's enough to retire on once we get those paid off. Now, spoiler alert, we had done very bad math. We hadn't counted on anything like our kids' education, rising living expenses, none of this stuff. We were budgeting based on ignorance. But we had these things going, they were going okay. And I had always wanted a property in the mountains. We ended up getting one because we could short-term rent the thing. We could help offset our expenses on it. We didn't expect to make money, but we did. We actually made money on this. And I thought, wow. So we have this awesome home that we can visit. Because remember, you can own a second or third home as a long-term rental, which is not the same as a second home. But I'm just saying you can own long-term rentals, but you can't just go visit those. You can't take your friends and say, hey, let's have a weekend over at my house because other people are living in it, right? You just can't do that. But with a vacation rental, you can do that. And so we picked my very favorite place in Colorado, Grand Lake. It's on the west side of Rocky Mountain National Park. And we bought there. It started making money. We thought, this is crazy. And of course, what real estate people do as soon as that happens is we have to do it again. Yeah. So we did a new build, and that thing, by the time it was done, it was worth so much more than we had contracted for it. Our appraiser had to write a letter to the bank to say, no, I'm serious. It's actually worth this much. I know the loan is way lower, but here's why. A number of things. We paid for some upgrades direct to the builder that didn't show up in the purchase cost, but were actually a cost. And things just went up. Now, this is 2018. So this wasn't COVID time and crazy booms. It's just these things happen. We got, during the beginning of COVID, I remember I was on a webinar with Brandon Turner, and he threw this out. There were probably 400 of us on the webinar. And he said, are you going to get serious about real estate, or are you just playing with it? Well, at this time we owned 7 properties, but I still wasn't really taking it seriously. I was doing my work as a commercial photographer and a videographer, business to business stuff, consumer advertising, billboards, that kind of stuff. And I was spending about 80-90% of my time on my 1099, the work that I did as a photographer, and about 15-20% on my real estate. Well, I said, well, what would happen? How much money did I make in commercial photography over the last 10 years? I took a guess at it. And I said, well, how much money have I made from income and appreciation? In real estate, I put that number at the bottom, and I thought, wait a minute, those numbers are real close together. But if I have spent 80% of my time on photography and only 20% on real estate, what would happen if I switched that? and I spent 80% of my time on real estate. It took me about 10 seconds to make a career move right there.
Exactly. You see a whole new future and opportunities just open up. That's incredible.
And it did open up, and it was phenomenal. And the amount that we made between rents and appreciation puts me somewhere into the year 2040 working as a photographer if I had stayed with that. Now, that said, here comes the title of the podcast, The Real Estate Pessimist. Things happen, and we've had setbacks, and we've had very expensive things. We had a conversation just as recently as this morning where we're talking about having to do some capital capex, we call it, the expenses that go into the improvement of the property itself, not just a repair. And we're going to have to repaint a 3-story property in a very expensive market. That's going to cost us money. Now, the good thing is we have money to pay for that. This isn't going to bankrupt us. And this is a very important thing to keep in mind, is that if your property is making the income, yeah, it stinks to pay to get things fixed and repaired and so on. But it's a lot better than having a $7,000, a $15,000 expense out of your home account and there's nothing to pay for it, right? If you've got the real estate that pays for itself, this is a huge, it's a big deal. Kristi, let's talk a little bit about why this got started. And I think it was an Instagram post, wasn't it?
Yeah.
That kind of precipitated this whole thing. Do you even remember what that post was?
I can't remember the post, but I remember laughing because we were messaging on Instagram, and I was just like, "Wait, are we serious? Is this real?
Yeah.
Are we actually going to start this?" And what I found great and amazing was that as we started talking about why we wanted to do this podcast, it was
Why?
crazy how synergistic both of our reasonings were.
Yes.
And just like as you were describing what you were wanting out of it and what I wanted to do, we both have a passion for educating others to help them get in the game. And it's, for me, I just didn't even know most of these possibilities existed. So
I knew none of them.
Yeah, I'm so passionate about just helping people get out there and go, hey, let's just let you know that this is an opportunity. This is a possibility for you, for an ordinary person like you. You can do this too. It's not just for that one rich guy who owns everything in town. So yeah.
And so what was happening is that there was an Instagram post about some kind of problem that we were having or some kind of frustration that we had. And I said something like, oh, people don't really want to know what I have to say about it. And Kristi said, well, sometimes the world needs to hear what it needs to hear, not what it wants to hear. And I was like, so do you think the world really needs to hear this? Like, are we talking about a podcast? And it was the weirdest thing because I've had a bunch of material put together that was right on this topic. Kristi's got tons of material from her own experience to put into this. And a common frustration that we felt in the real estate space, especially with podcasts and media and so on, is talking only about the rainbows and unicorns, only the sunny side of things, only the great things. And if there's a setback, oh, it's just a little bump, and we just skim right over it. Because let's face it, if somebody shows up on social media and says, I lost about $500,000. Hey, sign up for my mastermind. It just doesn't work. So people have to say, we were talking about this last night in one of the accountability groups I'm on, is that starting a real estate discussion with anything other than, I'm going to make you $1 million and you'll be able to quit your job that you hate and you'll be able to sit on the beach and you never have to work again. Well, almost everybody wants that. And they want to believe that that's true. And so they're like, I'm in, you could take my money. I'll sign up for your course because people want that. There's a couple problems with that. Why don't you launch into a couple problems with that scenario there, Kristi?
The thing is, and it's about entrepreneurs as well as real estate investors because that's what we are, but we will trade a 40-hour week W-2 to work 80 hours on our own. But the difference is when you have the ability to control your schedule and you're able to do something that you're passionate about, it doesn't actually feel like 80 hours.
It doesn't.
I've started my first successful company in 2015 and then threw in real estate investing and started many other companies in the process. And I guarantee I probably work 60 to 80-hour weeks, have extra gray hair and wrinkles than I'd like. But you know what? Because I'm doing it for me and not making someone else's dream come true, but doing this, that's where it's that's where it just feels different. So yes, you are going to be hit hard. I mean, probably from this last hurricane, I'm going to be 10 to 15 grand in repairs and other expenses. Did I want to pay that? No.
No.
But like you said, the properties have the ability, when set up properly, that they will then fund themselves, and you'll replenish that bank account and go from there. But yeah.
Yeah. And it's the long game here. And this is one of the things that we were going to talk about is that this podcast was born somewhat out of frustration from just only the sunny side things. And part of the problem with that is that if you're beginning as a real estate investor, or maybe you're in the middle and you're not experiencing only success all the time, and you get a big setback, you might think, oh, wow, what am I doing wrong? I must be a failure here, because all the people that I admire, I only see them winning, 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 winning. That's all they ever post about was great deals. They don't really hear very much about, or it's certainly not any kind of postmortem on what went wrong and why. And our purpose is to tell you what went wrong and why, and how you can avoid it. That's what
Exactly.
we're going to work on, breaking down things as we go through this, so that you don't feel like an imposter when you get a little bit of a setback. Because here's this thing: if you stay in it longer than 5 minutes, you will experience some sort of setback. And we want to let you know that's normal,
Yes.
that temporary setbacks, expenses, and so on are part of long-term success. It just is.
Yes, 100%. Because the minute you know that, hey, this is a normal thing that comes up, then it allows you to just continue to have the strength and the energy to go forward. So we're going to share the real stories. We're also going to share how we solve the problem. And the great thing is, there isn't one solution. There are multiple ways to look at things and move them forward. So we're going to tell you all of it, the good, the bad, and the truth. So that way you can have the confidence to go take control of your life, become an investor, and start to make an impact on your communities.
Right. And this, I got my sister into it. My wife got her siblings into this. We believe in this and the power that it has, the potential to literally change your life. And that's why we're talking about this. So yes, we will talk about failures. We'll talk about dangers. We'll talk about the quicksand and lava and all those other things that you really need to avoid. And if you get into those troubles, how to best get out of them. But more than anything, even though the title has pessimist in it, this isn't a pessimistic podcast. This is a podcast about perseverance and long-term success, but the reality of some of the short-term struggles and setbacks.
Yeah, exactly. Perseverance. Because guess what, guys? Life is hard. And it's how you respond, it's how you pause and respond to the hard things that come up, and start climbing that next mountain that defines you. So we will share all of it, give you tools, give you a full tool belt to be able to take these on. Because I just, my biggest thing that I hate is when there's people who look at it and go, oh, I really want to, but I don't think that's for me. And I know if they just have the tools and the confidence, that they can jump in, and you guys can start investing in those properties too. So we are here to
Now,
help you.
yeah, now notice Kristi said something really important. I want to point this out, is that what it takes to succeed here is the mindset. This really isn't about having the connections or being born with money or having a huge W-2. It's about mindset. It's about mindset and your willingness and ability to get through this. Some of it's techniques, yes, but let me point out the difference between mindset and technique. I did a presentation to some high schoolers a couple of weeks ago. We were talking about identity. And I asked them, I said, okay, so how many of you in this audience have changed the oil on a 10-cylinder Dodge Viper? Well, one kid in the auditorium raises his hand. Now, had he really done that? Had he not? I don't know. I wouldn't lay more than $20 on it one way or the other, but it's possible. And I said, okay, so maybe one person has. Now, I looked on YouTube before I got on stage here to talk about this, and I found a couple dozen YouTube tutorials on how you could change the oil in a Dodge Viper. Knowing that, how many of you in this audience feel that you could now go out and on your own change the oil in a Dodge Viper? You know how my hands went up? None. No more hands went up. And here's where the difference between the techniques and tools and identity and mindset comes into play. YouTube has the techniques. YouTube has the information. The information on how to do real estate investing is out there. I've got to deal with a sewer issue. Kristi's got to get a pool cleaned up that got flooded by a hurricane. Okay, to figure out how to do these things between Google, YouTube, DuckDuckGo, whatever you use, you can figure out how to do it. However, if you do not believe that you are the kind of person who can figure out how to solve a sewer line issue, or that you could change the oil in a Dodge Viper, you could have 10,000 videos about changing the oil or whatever it is, and you won't make a move because the mindset, you tell yourself, I could never do that. That's one of the core things we do want to address in this podcast going forward, is helping you see and believe through examples and through stories of how you, in fact, can be a success despite setbacks. Because the techniques, the information, the tools, that stuff is out there. There are books, there are podcasts, there are blogs about it. But if you don't believe that you could do it, you won't do it. But we believe you can.
We do. And that's why we want to help you get out there and get the confidence to do it. There's a saying that wisdom comes from actually taking action. So you can learn and have as much knowledge as you want, but the true wisdom comes from taking action. And sometimes you just need to jump in and buy the first and know that there are going to be things that go wrong. You will look back later and go, oh, wow, that was a rookie move. But you're never going to figure that out if you don't take action. And we're going to help you understand that if you fast forward and think about what is the worst possible scenario and outcome that could happen, and guess what? You're not going to die from having a bad real estate investment. I mean, most likely. Most likely you're not.
You're more likely to get struck by lightning in Florida on a golf course, right? I mean, that's just that's a real thing. So we're going to talk about this, but we've said we're going to be candid. Kristi, I'm going to share a little story, and you're going to share a little story here, whatever you want to, so that you know, as you're listening to this, we're real people, and we have had our shining moments. We'll tell you how this turns out because we're still dealing with this on my end, but about a week ago or so, I got a little video from one of my vendors, and it's not a video any of you ever want to see. It was a video outside one of my big short-term rentals. It sleeps 20 people. It's on the top of a hill, and these were his exact words. You're not going to believe this. There's turds everywhere. And yes, in fact, there were. It was not a pretty sight. We got that immediate situation solved. The long-term solution is going to take a little bit longer. That's a setback of a thing that just happens. There are sometimes little things that happen because of our own ignorance. And here's one that started when we did our first long-term rental, very first house. We didn't even have renters in it yet. I was still working on the rehab. And we had heard that you're supposed to do a background check on your tenants, which, by the way, is true. You should definitely do that. So we were trying this out. We were trying to figure out how to do a background check. And I was at the house doing a remodel, and our renter came to the house to check something out, to look at it. They had already signed the lease, I believe, and we were doing the background check on them right then. Well, I answered the door, and our tenant is standing there. And I think his name was something super generic, like Mike Smith, right? About as generic a name as you could possibly get. And I get a phone call from my wife, and I pick up my cell phone and I'm talking to her. She says, I did the background check. He's wanted for murder or assault or it's like some kind of felony. And I'm backing up slowly from the door. And my renter is kind of moving forward with his eyes narrowed a little bit. And I'm like, he's the guy. He's going to kill me. He's like, because I'm nervous and he's wondering, here's the spoiler alert. She's like, no, wrong, Mike Smith. No. Okay, we're fine. We're fine. So it turned out to be an absolute nothing, right? But, and I will tell you, really, probably half of the things that are brought to your attention as a crisis that you should freak out about, especially in the short-term rent, are not crisis at all, right? We had somebody say, the stove is broken. The stove is broken. It won't work. Like the cooktop, it's like it goes on and then it goes off. And then it's like, oh, wait, it's an electric cooktop. It turns on and off. There's nothing broken here.
The stories from short-term rental guests are going to be amazing, guys. Sometimes you really question humanity with some of the stories, but they are good and yes, so good.
So, Kristi, have you always batted 1,000 here? Have you ever had
Always, for
any?
sure. Yeah, I mean, it just comes to mind. Remember when I said I bought the two properties in 2018 and then I accidentally bought four in Ohio the next year?
You mentioned that.
So I thought I was riding that wave of I'm hitting not just home runs, I'm hitting grand slams. So let's go. So I decide in 1 year that I'm going to focus on Columbus, Ohio, because I grew up in Ohio. That was the next market. We wanted to bring in someone else to invest with us to get him into real estate investing. So I did a market tour, and during that tour, put offers in and ended up getting four properties. I thought I had a contractor lined up, and turns out that contractor, just after we finished closing on all four properties, he completely ghosted. Had a major life challenge happen, and I didn't have a backup contractor. Three of the four properties were complete guts and remodels that were going to be turned into long-term and short-term rentals. And here I am going, oh crap. I've got one more partner who's in this, who was trusting me to understand the market and to get the right types of contractors and deals. Another partner who I was bringing in to become an investor for the first time. And I'm looking at this going, oh my gosh, did I just let everyone down? Did I just sell them this dream of, oh my, like Kristi's done so well on these properties and I'm just a fraud. I'm an imposter. I don't actually know what I'm doing. And there was a day, and you guys will hear all of these stories, but there was a day where it started off pouring rain, and I'm at the first house, and so many things had gone wrong with busted water mains and sewer and everything, but finally got this property to a point where it could go on the market to try and sell it, to just get rid of it and to move on. Pouring rain, the sidewalk panel, I'm trying to put it back into place. So I'm a soggy mess, soggy, muddy mess, but I knew that I needed to move that sidewalk panel. And oh my goodness, concrete is so heavy, because I knew once the rain and the mud went away, then it would not be level and it would cost me even more money to get it fixed. So I'm standing there in the rain, moving concrete, when I get a call from a contractor who stole a TV from me at the duplex, and he's telling me the sewer is actually backing up in the basement when we dropped off your washer and dryer. I said,
Just thought you'd want to know.
yeah, thought you'd want to know. I'm like, okay, Josh. Well, and I knew he had stolen the TV, and because he needed to go buy drugs. Oh yeah, because when I lost my contractor, the way I found new contractors was spamming everyone on Facebook and Craigslist and just getting any random Joe Schmo to show up for that day to do a project, which, whew, what a cluster. But so he owed me a favor. So I'm in the basement of the duplex and we're snaking out the line, trying to get all this, because guess what, guys? People love to flush tampons, baby wipes, everything down drains that don't belong in drains. So we're snaking out the basement, finally get that to be cleared out. And thankfully the tree roots had not busted through the clay piping outside. So we didn't have a bigger issue. And I get to the end of the day, I go back to our single family home where they had all finished construction. And oh, by the way, I was leaving the next morning to fly back to Tahoe from Ohio. So I'm down to a few hours. It's like 8 o'clock at night, pouring rain. And I realized that the contractors had taken a bunch of bins and just kept throwing construction debris in them without bags, without doing anything. And so the trash company was not going to pick it up. So I'm in the pouring rain, taking out the stuff, putting them into flimsy trash bags because no stores were open on the Sunday night. So I have these flimsy black trash bags trying to drag this stuff to the street. It's finally about 10 o'clock. I get everything done. Everything's at the street for the trash. Get in the rental car to go drive home to my friend's house. And there was a light, I guess. I just drove right through a red light and I see the pretty lights behind me as the police officer's pulling me over. And at this point, so I've been in the rain all day. I'm a soggy, wrinkly, wet mess. I'm probably dirty and muddy and filthy. And he takes one look at me and he's like, Miss, I'm on drunk duty and you are clearly not drinking. He's like, but
You got other problems,
he's like,
but
are you okay? I just looked at him. I said, I have had a very long day and I would just like to go home and get a shower and go to bed. He said, where are you going? I'm like, literally like a mile up the road. He said, okay, just be careful because there are drunk drivers out there. So I keep driving. I get to my friend's house. I pull up in the driveway. My foot is up, ready to step inside. I have my hands up, ready to turn the knob. And I get a call from my brother out of my house in Lake Tahoe, the one that my dog made me buy for the backyard. And he's like, and he had been helping me all day, so he knew the nightmare I was in. He said, hey, where's the water shut off? Because the laundry room's flooding. And I'm like, oh my gosh, are you kidding? And we had the key that goes in and can turn the water shut off. And I said, literally walk out the front door, turn the key, and it'll turn off. He's like, cool, I'll do that. We'll mess with it in the morning. So then I go to finish walking into the house and I am locked out of my friend's house. I
Oh,
was
man.
so exhausted at that point. I was ready to curl up on the concrete floor and just of the garage and just like cry and say I'm a complete failure. Nothing's going right. I've lost everyone's money. I have no business doing this. Now, we will get into all of these stories and more later. But guys, I'm here. Those
Yeah, that's
properties
right.
actually turned out to be pretty amazing deals all around. And
Yes.
you so don't worry. The worst things can happen. You can have days from hell and you will, but it's all worth it because this is for you. This is for your family's future, for your future, and it's a great path to having your freedom of time and freedom of choice of how you spend your time.
That's right. And that's the point here is that we've made it through this. We're going to have more things. My phone will ring and something else will come up. But the future me, this is really important. And the future you, are they going to look back on the you and the me of today and say, yeah, I'm glad you did that. I'm glad you did that work because it puts you in a very, very different place than if you had never taken action. We'll be sharing tons of stories. Hopefully you are inspired by these and we can bring you along on our journey. But what we really want to do is get you going and feeling successful on your journey. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.